it's Alice, and today I thought I would give you some recommendations for books I feel like are perfect to read for summer. I feel like there's something really special about reading in summer and like on your holidays and things like that. And I've got a bunch of books that are all in like different genres and they have different themes and they're not all like strictly summer related, but they give me summer vibes. Like they're books that I feel like would be good to read by like the pool if you live in a place that has pools, so not in Norway, or like that you can take out with you into the garden and read outside or in a park or something. We do have those here, so that would be more appropriate for people who live where I live. First up, we have got A Ladder to the Sky by John Boyne, and I loved this book. In here, we meet a man named Maurice, and all he wants to do is become a writer, but he's not very good at coming up with his own stories. And as a young man, he meets this distinguished older writer who trusts him and tells him about something that's happened in his life in the past. And our dear Maurice uses this story to start off this career that he is so very desperate for. I have a slight caveat for this one, and it's that if you're going to like this, you have to be the kind of reader that can read about unlikable characters, because the main character in this book is horrible. Like, he is a narcissist, he's so selfish, and he is just like the worst. Like, he's so infuriating. So if you can't read about unlikable characters, you're probably gonna hate this one. But I think what makes this book work is that it's told from lots of different perspectives. So we're not in the main character's head all of the time, and we see him from an outside perspective as well. And I just love this book. It's kind of like a longer book, and it's perfect for just like sitting down and getting really like devoured by it. It's just a really good book. Secondly, we have got my favorite Virginia Woolf novel, and it is Mrs. Dalloway. And this is perfect to read in summer because it's set during the course of a single day in summertime in 1923. And we meet Clarissa Dalloway, who is going about her day, and she is preparing to have a dinner party in the evening. Now, if you've read anything by Virginia Woolf, you'll know that she writes in stream of consciousness, which is a very like particular style, I guess, and it's not a style I usually like, but for some reason with Woolf it just works for me. And this is the perfect book to read if you can like read it in a day. It has very few breaks in it, and I feel like it's perfect if you have time to like take it all in one go. I get that this is not like for everyone though, but I feel like it's worth giving a shot and see if you like the writing style, because if you do, this is a great novel. Then we've got a bit of a different one, and it is Terranolius by Claire G. Coleman. This is a science fiction novel, and it's set in Australia in the future, where the settlers have colonized the country, and there's a lot of conflict, and they just want peace, and they will do anything to like get to a peaceful state, whereas the natives are obviously desperate for freedom and willing to fight for it. This is basically a book about colonization, and in a lot of ways it comments a lot on our own history, and it's really clever, but it's also very exciting. We get really deep into the heads of the characters in here, which sometimes is kind of horrific, but it's very interesting. And there's also a twist in the middle of this book that I absolutely loved. Now, I feel like this is the perfect book to read for summer because the Australia in the future in this book is really, really hot and dry, and you can really feel it. Like, the descriptions of it is amazing. Another book you can really feel the heat in is The Dry by Jane Harper. This is a mystery novel, and it's also set in Australia, and it's about this federal agent who returns to his small hometown to attend the funeral of his best friend who has apparently committed suicide. But then he stays behind because he feels like it might not be a suicide, and he decides to try and investigate it. This is set during a heat wave and during a drought, and it's such an atmospheric book. Like, the setting is captured so well, and it has that like small town full of secrets thing going on in it, which you all know probably that I love. And Although the plot isn't maybe completely original, I didn't see the reveal coming at all. Also, if you happen to read this one or you have read it, I would also really recommend the second book in the series, which is Force of Nature. This is set out in the Australian bush, and it's about this like corporate retreat thing where a bunch of people go into the forest but not everyone makes it back out, and this is equally like atmospheric and it's such a good book. Then we have got Call Me By Your Name by Andrea Ossiman. This is set in the Italian Riviera during summer, and we meet this young man who has this intense love affair with this house guest that is staying with his family over the summer. Obviously, the setting of this makes it very summery, and this is just a beautiful story about intimacy and love, and it's also kind of like a coming-of-age story as well. The writing style in here is just fantastic. It's raw and honest, and the way that the author captures the main character's inner lives and inner thoughts, it's just so good. It is kind of an intense novel. It explores longing and desire, but it's just so beautiful. And even me, who is not a huge fan of like romance novels, like this got even me. Next, we have got one of my favorite books, and it is Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. This is a historical fiction novel. It's set in North Carolina in the 50s and 60s, and we meet this young girl who lives out in the marsh all by herself, and in the nearest town, she is known as the Marsh Girl, and all of these people spin all of these wild tales about how she lives her life. And then the body of a young man is discovered just outside of town, and everyone immediately suspects the infamous Marsh Girl. Now, there is an element of mystery in this book, but I wouldn't necessarily call it a mystery novel. It's much more about this main character and seeing her throughout her life. I love this book. I love the main character and seeing her grow up. It's beautiful, but also painful, and in some ways she is so mature, and in other ways she's so innocent and naive, and I just loved following her. I also love the descriptions of the nature and the landscape in this book, and I really feel like I could picture everything. It was kind of like watching a movie in my head. I do actually think they're making a movie out of this though, which I'm very excited to see. I imagine it's gonna be beautiful. Then we have got a cozy mystery, and it is The Thursday Murder Club by Richard Osman. This is set in England in this idyllic retirement village where 4 pensioners like meeting once a week to discuss murders, and they call themselves the Thursday Murder Club. And then a brutal murder takes place right in their village, and they find themselves in the middle of the case. Or they kind of like involve themselves in the case because they are nosy as all hell. This is the perfect book for when you want something on the lighter side and a little bit like delightful, but with a murder in it. The pensioners in here are like all amateur sleuths, and because they're so old, they don't care if they get in trouble or not, and they like will stick their nose in other people's business and not care at all. And it's just really fun to get to read about, and this retirement village actually like works as the perfect backdrop for this story. Like everything in here is just like really entertaining and light, and it works really well. Next, we have got another one of my favorite books that if you haven't read yet, maybe now's the time, and it is Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ng. This is set in this immaculate suburb in Cleveland where we meet the Richardson family, and they decide to let their rental home to this single mother and her daughter. And as the novel progresses, their lives become more and more entangled, and there's a lot of resentment, and all of these secrets start slithering out, which has some devastating consequences. This is the kind of book that again focuses a lot on the characters, and they are so well written. It explores motherhood and womanhood, and we get to see these 2 very different mothers and their relationship with their kids, and it's just all so incredibly interesting, and it's just such a well-written novel. It is kind of like a slow burn of a book, but it's so good, and I cannot recommend it enough. Second to last, we have got the opposite of slow burn of a book, and it is The Seven Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle by Stuart Turton. This is a roller coaster of a novel. Like, it's a lot, but it's also like really fun. It is kind of like a mystery novel, I guess, but it's actually set in a time loop. So all of these people in this like mansion are doomed to live the same day over and over and over. And by the end of that day, there is a woman named Evelyn Hardcastle that dies. And our main character is told that if he can figure out who has killed Evelyn Hardcastle, he can finally get out of the time loop. And he is like waking up in all of these different characters' bodies, and it's kind of complicated, but it's also like really fun. This is really engaging and exciting. It is a lot, like it's a little bit confusing sometimes, but it's just so good. It's filled with interesting characters, like the concept of the story is really interesting, and you're trying to like figure out what's going on, and it's the kind of book that you are sort of trying to like solve a puzzle, but you can't see what the picture is until you put in like the very final piece. And it's the perfect book for when you want to just like be completely engrossed in something. Lastly, we have got a book that I read last summer, and it is The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. This is set in the 90s in a suburb in Charleston, and we meet a group of women who come together for a book club, and they love discussing true crime. And as this novel goes on, they end up getting really involved with a new neighbor of theirs, which turns out to be a blood-sucking creature. This has some fantasy and horror elements to it, but it's mostly like a kind of domestic book. Like, we mostly follow a housewife, and honestly, this is the kind of book you should read if you want something like fun, entertaining, and a little bit gory. Like, it's not that deep, but I don't feel like it always needs to be. Like, sometimes you just want something with a great setting that's really entertaining to read with a vampire in it, you know? Okay everyone, those were all of the books I had to recommend for you today, and if you were looking for a book to read this summer, I hope this helped. I would love to know if any of you know of a book you feel like is perfect to read during the summertime, and as usual, links to my Patreon and other social media will be in the description if you're interested, and I will see you soon. Bye!